my dear students. I am Vishali Korapati, Assistant Professor in Vignan University. Hello my dear students. I hope you all are doing good. Today I am going to take antihypertensive drugs. What are antihypertensive drugs? So before knowing about this antihypertensive, let's see what is hypertension. So hypertension is a common cardiovascular disease. Okay, so what is happening in this? The blood flow will be more. When the blood flow is very fast, what will happen? The force of this blood will rupture the walls of arteries. Okay ma, ventricles will get rupture and the arteries will get rupture, because if you see, the blood force will be more in arteries when compared to veins, because arteries should pass the blood whole body. Okay ma, but when it comes to veins, they have to bring the blood, isn't it? So they won't have that much pressure, so the force will affect only arteries here. Okay, and if the person get this hypertension, the person will be suffering with this for many years. If it is stage 1, then the person will come back to the normal stage, which is called as normotensive. When the person have normal blood pressure, then it is called as normotensive. So nowadays this hypertension have become very common in everybody. After 40 years, even after 35 years, many of them are facing this hypertension problem or hypotension, but most of the cases will be hypertension only. Even if we see in teenagers, even they are suffering with this hypertension. Okay, when it comes to when this blood pressure is for many years, there may be chances that it will spoil our heart, brain, kidney and eyes. Okay, many studies under this epidemiology, they have confirmed that if there is more blood pressure, there will be higher risks of cardiovascular diseases. So more blood pressure, more chances of getting heart diseases. Okay ma? So next, types of hypertension. There are two types. One is primary and the next one is secondary hypertension. Primary is most common one and there won't be any cause for that. But secondary hypertension, it can be due to renal or any vascular or any endocrine disorder. Okay, so now we are talking about hypertension. I have told you so many times, blood pressure. What is this blood pressure? Okay, if my blood is traveling in veins or artery, it will maintain one pressure, isn't it? That pressure is called as blood pressure. Okay, we have two types of blood pressures in this. One is systolic blood pressure and the other one is diastolic blood pressure. So let's see first systolic blood pressure. It is the maximum pressure which is attained when there is ventricular systole. Systole is nothing but contraction of ventricles. Okay ma? So systolic blood pressure is the pressure which is attained during ventricular systole. Next one, diastolic blood pressure. In this diastolic blood pressure, the pressure which attained during ventricular diastole is called as diastolic blood pressure. That means ventricular diastole means relaxation. Isn't it ma? I told you in my introduction class, diastole means relaxation. So the pressure, diastolic blood pressure, is the pressure which attained during ventricular diastole. Ventricular diastole is known as diastolic blood pressure. When comes to pulse pressure, which we will see here, okay, it is the pulse pressure is difference between systole and diastolic blood pressure. Okay, that means systolic blood pressure minus diastolic blood pressure. Okay, and mean arterial pressure, we have seen this mean arterial pressure. That means it is diastolic blood pressure plus, okay, 1/3 of pulse pressure, which is diastolic blood pressure plus 1 by 3. I told you in introduction class, I have told you one example. 110, imagine my blood pressure is 110 by 80. The same formula, ma. Okay. So next one, JNC classification. We have in hypertension, we have two stages, stage 1 and stage 2. So before this, we will see normotension. In our when we have a blood pressure at normotension, which is normal, then we will be having blood pressure at, which is systolic blood pressure will be less than 120 mmHg. And when it comes to diastolic, it should be 80 mmHg. Nowadays, due to we have even students, due to so much of pressure, your BP may vary from 140 till 130 to 140. But after 140, it is considered as hypertension. Okay. So next one is pre-hypertension. Pre-hypertension is 120 to 139. Okay. And diastolic 80 to 89. When it comes to stage 1 hypertension, it is from 140 to 159 mmHg. And diastole will be 90 to 99 mmHg. Okay, when it comes to stage 2, this means the person have higher levels of hypertension. This patients will get easy cardiovascular diseases, which is like it will be greater than 160 mmHg. When it comes to diastole, it will be greater than 100 mmHg. Let's see the classification of hypertension. So antihypertensive drugs are divided into 5 subclassifications. One is diuretics, renin-angiotensin system inhibitors, which is RAS inhibitors, and the next one is sympathetic inhibitors, and the fourth one is calcium channel blockers, and the fifth one is vasodilators. Once again, diuretics, RAS inhibitor, sympathetic inhibitor, calcium channel blockers, vasodilators. So if you see in this diuretics, it is again subclassified into 3 types. One is thiazides, high ceiling diuretics, and potassium sparing diuretics. Okay, when it comes to RAS inhibitors, it is again divided into 3 subclassification: ACE inhibitors, AT1 receptor blockers, and direct renin inhibitors. Okay, sympathetic inhibitors, it is divided into 4 classifications. One is beta adrenergic blocker, alpha plus beta adrenergic blocker, alpha adrenergic blocker, central sympatholytics. Calcium channel blockers, phenylalkylamine, benzodiazepines, hydropyridines. Vasodilators. Vasodilators, they are divided into 2 types. One is arterial dilators and arterial plus venodilators. Okay, ma? Let's see all these classifications one by one. So when it comes to diuretics, previously we have seen in 2 classes that diuretics are the drugs which will promote our urine excretion. Okay. So let's see the categories of this diuretics. First one is thiazide diuretic, second one high ceiling diuretics, and potassium sparing diuretics. Let's see thiazide diuretic. Thiazides are like when we are taking this thiazides, mainly like hydrochlorothiazide and chlorthalidone. These 2 are the first choice of drugs when it comes to thiazide drugs. Okay, and we can only give this type of diuretics to the patients who are in their first stages, like mild to moderate stages only. We can't give to stage 2 hypertension. Okay, and when they are conducting any clinical trials, the main choice of drug are these 2 drugs. One is hydrochlorothiazide and the next one is chlorthalidone. Okay. And this is a long acting drug which will show it's acting for 48 hours. Initially, when we are giving this type of diuretics, it will reduce our plasma and extracellular fluid volume. by 5 to 15 liters. Actual mechanism of this thiazide diuretic is it will excrete more sodium and water from our body. Initially, when we are taking this diuretics, it will reduce the plasma and extracellular fluid volume, and also this will reduce my cardiac output. But after some time, my body will start to show some compensatory mechanism. Okay, so what it will do, it will balance my sodium levels in my body. Okay, when it is removing it, it will try to store more sodium by some other means. Okay, and it will balance the plasma volume. It won't balance each and everything, like it won't balance my extracellular fluid, by which my blood pressure will increase. In starting class I told you, when there is more fluid, blood pressure will be more. Okay, when there is less fluid, pressure will be less. So it will only compensate sodium in medium levels. Okay, so it won't affect my blood pressure at that time, but it will maintain my blood pressure and it will reduce my sodium excretion. So we have to administrate this in very low dose. That is 12.5 mg per day. Okay, so after using this drug for longer period, if we are not getting that antihypertensive response, then we have to increase this drug to 25 mg per day. 12.5 mg per day is recommended. But if the person is not getting this antihypertensive activity, antihypertensive response, then you can go to 25 mg per day. But more than that, it is not safe at all. So as I told you, the thiazide mechanism, this is the whole mechanism. What it will do, it will inhibit sodium chloride symport in the distal convoluted tubule. If you see the nephron, you will be having distal convoluted tubule. There it will inhibit this sodium chloride symport, which you will learn in diuretic chapter. You have diuretic chapter also. Okay, when it is inhibiting that sodium chloride symport, it will promote sodium and water excretion more. When it is excreting more water and sodium, it will reduce my cardiac output, because less water content, less fluid content, less pressure and less cardiac output. So here my cardiac output got reduced, and eventually my blood pressure will be reduced, and then my peripheral ventricular resistance will also get reduced. Okay, and if we are taking this as a chronic therapy, it will reduce sodium concentrations in my body, and it will do vascular smooth muscle contraction. So let's see the other actions of this thiazide. The main action of this thiazide is it will reduce the blood pressure in hypertensive patients. Not only that, it will elevate the blood sugar in some patients. Why? Because the reduced levels of insulin in their body. If there are reduced levels of insulin, there will be more levels of blood sugar levels. Okay, let's see the pharmacokinetics of this drug thiazide. It is we will take it orally, and it is well absorbed orally, and we won't suggest this through IV or any injections. Okay, and distributions, this is highly lipid soluble, and when it comes to metabolism, it is metabolized in our liver and excreted through urine, obviously, and its T half is 3 to 6 hours. When it comes to its uses, first one, edema. I already told you, if we have sodium, best friend of sodium is water. Enemy of sodium is potassium, and best friend of sodium is water. So when there is no sodium, water content will be not there. So first one is edema. In edema patients, we will use this drug, thiazide drug. And hypertension, we already know why we are using hypertension. And diabetes insipidus. In diabetes insipidus, we will use only for non-insulin dependent patients, not for insulin dependent patients. Okay, ma? And hypercalciuria. Next one, adverse effects which are called as complications. So first adverse effect is acute saline depletion. Acute saline depletion means there will be deficiency of electrolytes in our body, mainly potassium, sodium. Why potassium? Because when we are using this, it will also excrete potassium from our body. So to compensate this, we will be giving potassium sparing diuretics. Okay, so this will be like counteraction of this thing. So when we are giving thiazides, we should also give this potassium sparing diuretics to compensate that potassium loss. Okay, the next one is dilutional hyponatremia. What is this hyponatremia? It's like there will be a loss of sodium in our blood. Okay, you will be having GIT and CNS disturbances. Like GIT means sometimes you will feel constipated and sometimes you will feel diarrhea. Due to this loss of water, mostly you will feel only constipation. Okay, and when it comes to CNS, as it is highly lipid soluble, you will be having CNS disturbances. Okay, next one is hair loss. Okay, and allergic manifestations. Next one is hyperuricemia. Hyperuricemia means more levels of uric acid in our blood. Okay, next one is hyperglycemia. Hyperglycemia means more levels of high levels of glucose in our blood. Okay, and hyperlipidemia, more levels of lipids in our blood. And hypocalcemia means less levels of calcium and magnesium depletion, some magnesium imbalances. And hypokalemia, because of this diuretics, thiazide diuretics, you will be having more potassium loss. So we will see what to do to prevent this hypokalemia. First one, you have to take potassium dietary supplements. Like supplements is not like true tablets, you can take foods also. Okay, and next one is supplement of potassium chloride. It should be 24 to 72 MEq by day. And counter use, you can use potassium sparing diuretics. Next one, thiazide drug interaction. Many have got confused in this drug interaction and interactions. Interactions and drug interactions are the same. So next time you don't get confused what is drug interaction and interaction is, if I am using one drug, I can't take another drug combinedly. So if I am taking thiazides, we can't take high saline diuretics. The blood pressure levels will go down than the normal. That's why when we are taking this thiazides, we should not give any high saline diuretics. Then high saline diuretics and aminoglycoside antibiotics are both ototoxic and nephrotoxic. Ototoxic is our ear will get damaged. Okay, and nephrotoxic is our nephron, kidney will get damaged. Okay, clotrimazole, which is antifungal drug. Okay, when we are taking this clotrimazole with diuretics, it will cause thrombocytopenia. When we are taking high saline diuretics with indomethacin or any NSAIDs, this will diminish the actions of our diuretics. So if we are taking diuretics, still it won't show any action of diuretic. When it comes to high saline diuretics, which are also called as loop diuretics, this will inhibit the co-transporter of sodium potassium chloride. So the main drug in this high saline diuretic is furosemide. Furosemide is a prototype drug. Prototype drug means this is the main drug of this high saline diuretics. They will show short duration of action, and not only that, if I am taking this will reduce my sodium levels in my body. That's why we won't give this to hypertensive patients, like to take it routinely. We will give for 1 week or 2 weeks, we will stop it, and again we will give after some days, and again we will use for 1 or 2 weeks, then again we will stop it. If I am increasing the dose of this diuretic, it will increase my diuretic response also, which is it will excrete my urine like 10 liters per day. Furosemide also increases calcium excretion, and calcium is the main which is used for contraction. So when I am taking this furosemide, along with this I have to take thiazide, because in uses I have told you thiazide will decrease calcium excretion. So here furosemide is increasing the calcium excretion. So if I decrease this by giving thiazide, it will be useful, right? Pharmacokinetics of high ceiling diuretics. First one, absorption. It is given orally, and its bioavailability is 60. It is low lipid soluble but highly binded to our plasma protein for distribution. So redistribution will be there. So when it comes to metabolism, it will get conjugated partially with gluconic acid, okay, which is through liver only. And excretion, it is excreted unchanged by kidneys. Some of the amount is excreted through bile and in intestine, and not only that, the drug which is unchanged is excreted through our tubular secretion. Plasma T half is 1 to 2 hours. Let's see the uses of this high ceiling diuretics. First use is edema. Next one is acute pulmonary edema. Acute pulmonary edema means the lungs will be filled with water. When the lungs are filled with water, we use this type of high ceiling diuretic, which will reduce immediately. It will show fast action in cases of edema. Okay, and cerebral edema. Cerebral edema means sometimes due to some defect, our brain will be filled with water. And next one is hypertension. Obviously, we are talking about hypertension only. Hypokalemia of malignancies, like in some cancers, there will be less calcium in their body. So at that time we can give this one. Next one is adverse drug reaction. When it comes to adverse drug reaction, due to this drug, our urine will be in dark reddish or yellow color. And next one is nausea, dehydration and vomiting, electrolyte abnormalities or electrolyte imbalance like hyperuricemia, okay, which is more levels of uric acid in our blood, and hyponatremia, low levels of sodium, and hypomagnesemia, low levels of magnesium in blood. So let's see the interactions, ma. When we are taking this furosemide along with this antibiotics like aminoglycosides, what will happen? We will get ototoxicity. Ototoxicity, damage in our ears, okay, and hypokalemia. So I forgot a few points about this furosemide, ma. One is it's a strong diuretic and weaker antihypertensive when compared to thiazide. So thiazide will show more antihypertensive action when than this furosemide. When it compares to diuresis, it's a really very good drug. Lasix is the famous drug. If the person is having any heart disease or anything, doctors definitely suggest this Lasix drug. It will be very small tablet. They will suggest to take half. If the patient is taking night, they will go for frequent urination, so they won't have any sleep at nights. Okay, but they will suggest to take only half. That one also, for that also they will go for frequent urination. The natriuretic action won't last longer, like it will last only for 4 to 6 hours. Like if the patient is taking at night, by morning our sodium levels will be normal. So when I am taking this continuously, my sodium levels will decrease, but only in vascular smooth muscle, not to for longer hours. As I told you, if I am taking this drug at night, by 4 to 6 hours, like by next day morning, this action will be no more seen, like, but it will reduce my TPR and vascular responses. What is TPR? TPR is total peripheral resistance. Okay, and vascular responses means blood vessels will respond for any stimulus, that is known as vascular responses. If there is any stimulation in my body, if my blood vessels will respond to that, then it is known as vascular responses. So TPR and vascular responses will be reduced, but the sodium levels won't be reduced for whole round the clock. Okay ma, they will be maintained, like if I am taking at night, it will be till night only. Tomorrow morning my sodium levels will be normal. If I eat anything, with that I will get iodine, sodium and everything, isn't it? So next one is aldosterone antagonist. When it comes to aldosterone antagonist, the main drug in this aldosterone antagonist is spironolactone, and we already know how we are antagonizing this, how we are inhibiting this aldosterone. So this is the cycle. So from our liver is releasing this angiotensinogen. So renin will act on this angiotensinogen. Renin is released from our kidneys. Okay, when this renin is acting on this angiotensinogen, it is converted into angiotensin 1, and our lungs will release one enzyme called as angiotensin converting enzyme, and this will convert angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. Okay, this angiotensin will stimulate my adrenal glands. When it is stimulating this adrenal glands, these will release aldosterone. It's a steroid hormone ma. So it have few functions. One is it will do vasoconstriction. Okay, that means it will increase my blood pressure. Vasoconstriction means increase of blood pressure. On heart, it will increase when it is contracting more. Okay, it will increase my heart rate. When it comes to kidney, what it will do, aldosterone will retain this sodium and water. Okay, it will store sodium and water. So this is function of aldosterone. So now as we are looking into our blood pressure, we will take this one. Okay, so as it is doing this vasoconstriction, it will increase my blood pressure, and not only that, it is retaining my sodium and water. When there is more sodium and water in our body, the pressure will be increased. That's why we have to inhibit this aldosterone. So what is happening here? Spironolactone is aldosterone antagonist. Our spironolactone will go and inhibit in this angiotensin 2. Inhibit this angiotensin 2. Okay, when it is inhibiting this, it won't go and stimulate adrenals. When it is not stimulating this adrenal gland, it won't release any aldosterone. When there is no aldosterone, there won't be any vasoconstriction or any increased heart rate. Spironolactone have so many side effects, like it will increases estrogen levels and it will decreases the testosterone level. When a male taking the spironolactone, gynecomastia will be produced in males. Gynecomastia is nothing but breast size will increase. Okay, and impotency means when there is low testosterone, sperm won't be generated properly. Okay, so there will be impotency. And when it comes to females, it will show menstrual irregulation. Why menstrual irregulation? It is supplying a good amount of estrogen, right? But still, why females are facing this menstrual irregularities is because if there is normal levels of estrogen, females will get periods in time. But here it is increasing the estrogen levels. If there is no estrogen level, and we can suggest it for PCOD also. So when we are giving to PCOD patients, they will be having less estrogen, then it will compensate the estrogen levels. But if we are giving to normal female, they will be having normal estrogen, but this is increasing the estrogen levels. So that will irregulate the menstrual cycle. Okay, that's why we won't use the spironolactone much. And also it causes this hyperkalemia. It will increases our potassium levels. Next one is ACE inhibitors. So previously you have seen this. So what my drug will do, it will inhibit this ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme. When there is less angiotensin converting enzyme, it won't convert into angiotensin 2, which will angiotensin 2 also have action on our vessels, which is vasoconstrictions. Okay, directly and indirectly. Indirectly means it is stimulating adrenals, so it is releasing aldosterone. It will directly constrict vessels. So let's see the mechanism of action. So what it will do, it will inhibit the generation of angiotensin 2, which will result in dilation of arterioles. If there is constriction, blood pressure will be more. If there is dilation, blood pressure will be less, isn't it, ma'am? So this will reduce my blood pressure. And decrease in aldosterone production, I told you, directly and indirectly. Directly dilation and indirectly aldosterone production. So we are decreasing that one also. And next indirect function is, it is sympathetic nervous system activity. Okay, all this angiotensin 2 is sympathetic nervous system activity. How? When it is contracting, it is increasing the heart rate. Increased heart rate is sympathetic nervous system function. Fight or flight. Isn't it, ma? So this will decrease the sympathetic nervous system activity. Inhibit degeneration of bradykinin. Bradykinin is a vasodilator. If there is no bradykinin, what will happen? There will be more contraction. So I have to inhibit the degradation of this bradykinin. And not only that, this will also reverse the ventricular and vascular hypertrophy. Previously, I have told you, if you see this heart ventricular is normal, but if you have hypertrophy, there will be one block here. When there will be a block on that, what will happen? Cardiac output won't be proper, isn't it? Next one is pharmacokinetics. We will take it orally, but in emergencies, like the patient blood pressure is more, and in emergency stages, then we will give it intravenously, ACE inhibitors. And when we are taking it orally, we have to see that it should not interact with our food. So food, when we are taking food, it will reduces the absorption of this drug. So we have to take this drug 1 hour before meals, and it is metabolized, and it is a poor, it will cross our BBB very poorly. So it won't affect my CNS, and it is metabolized in liver and excreted in urine. When it comes to adverse effects, the first one is cough. Why we are getting cough? Because we are increasing bradykinase as well as prostaglandins, which will increase the inflammation. When there is more inflammation, the person feels this cough. Okay, so next one is angioedema. Angioedema is nothing but the edema which will be under the skin and mucous membranes. Okay, only our skin will get swollen, like somebody will be having puffy eyes. Proteinuria is a loss of protein in our urine. Teratogenic is toxicity to our fetus. In hypotension, low blood pressure, and neutropenia. And the next one is rashes, itching, loss of taste sensation, and hyperkalemia. And these ACE inhibitors are the first choice of drugs. Most patients will take require only low dosages, that means 2.5 to 10 mg per day, which is enalapril. When we are taking alone, it will control the hypertension in most of the patients. But if we are adding AC inhibitors with diuretics and beta blockers, then 90% it will reduce our hypertensive. It will reduce our hypertensive effect, which is why, because it is supra additive. What is supra additive, ma'am? Did you remember our introduction class in general pharmacology? Supra additive is a combination of drug is greater than individual drug. Means if I am taking any, like if I am giving only diuretic, it will control hypertension, but not as much as if I am giving diuretics, beta blockers and ACE inhibitors. 90% of the problem will be solved if I am giving these three. Okay, ba? That is supra-additive synergism. Next one is drug interactions of this ACE inhibitors. So when I am taking this ACE inhibitors, which drug I have to avoid? When I am taking this ACE inhibitors, I should avoid potassium sparing diuretics, because when I am taking both, potassium sparing will increase my potassium levels, and AC inhibitors will also increase my potassium levels in body. So if I am taking both at a time, I will get hyperkalemia. That's why I have to avoid taking this both at a time. And next one is AC inhibitors and lithium. When I am taking AC inhibitors with lithium, what it will do, AC inhibitors will stop elimination of this lithium. So lithium have so many adverse effects. When we have studied in this CNS drugs, it have shown more side effects, isn't it? So what will happen, all this toxic effects will be in our body only. Okay, so it will accumulate day by day, and it will show more toxic effects in our body. So it will stop elimination of lithium. AC inhibitors will stop lithium from excretion. Okay, then AC inhibitors plus NSAIDs. When we are taking this NSAIDs with this AC inhibitors, NSAIDs, what it will do, it will inhibit prostaglandin synthesis. When they are inhibiting prostaglandin synthesis, it will promote sodium and potassium retention. So sodium and potassium will be more in our body. When there is sodium and potassium retention in our body, what will happen? Fluid level will increase. When there is more fluid level, blood pressure will increase, right? Isn't it? So it won't show any anti-hypertensive effect. Then it's waste of taking AC inhibitors, isn't it? Then thiazides and AC inhibitors. When I am taking AC inhibitors and at the same time I am taking these diuretics, this both will do the same action. Okay, loss of sodium and water, diuretic action and AC inhibitors. So we will lose so much of water and sodium, we will become dehydrated. And uses of this, the first use is hypertension. Next one is acute myocardial infarction. Myocardial infarction means the myocardium layer in the heart won't get sufficient blood supply. Okay, when there is no sufficient blood supply to the myocardium layer is the main layer for contraction. When there is less blood supply to that layer, it won't get contracted, it won't show any contraction effect, and our heart stops gradually. Okay, congestive heart failure, you know congestive heart failure. Next one is diabetic nephropathy. Diabetic nephropathy is like our nephrons will get damaged because of this diabetes. And next one is scleroderma renal crisis.
Thank you, ma. Tomorrow I'll continue remaining antihypertensive drugs.